Hey guys, it's GS Luke bringing you my preview for the 2021 AT&T Byron Nelson tournament. This week we have a lot of the top players in the world looking to tune up before the PGA Championship, some European Tour guys that we haven't seen in a while, some amateurs, Monday qualifiers that look really interesting, and best of all, and most importantly of all, some really big DraftKings contests to go out and win this week. So this is going to be the preview. We're going to go over the course this week, some of the key stats to look out for, and finally we'll wrap it up with my top 5 plays for this week. So let's hop right into it. Hopping into the field for this week's event, we have an absolutely stacked field for the Byron Nelson. Typically we get a bunch of, duds coming in the field, not a lot of those top 25 guys, but this week we have Bryson, Rombo, Spieth, Decky off his Masters win. We even have Daniel Berger, Brooks Koepka, and Willie Z, all teaming up this week, which is pretty awesome to see. You have a lot of studs out there. The crowds are going to get to see some of those stars. We also have a lot of interesting golfers that we typically don't see. A lot of the European Tour guys, especially a lot of those that are playing next week for the major. And we're also seeing a lot of Korn Ferry Tour guys that are kind of filling in the cracks. Because it is the week before a major, a lot of guys tend to skip the week. But we do still have a lot of that top-end talent, which is nice to see. This week's course is TPC Craig Ranch. This is the first time that we are seeing this course, so we don't have much data for it, but we do have a lot of ancillary data, and there have been events at the course before. More specifically, there's been a couple Korn Ferry Tour events, also a nationwide tour event. That was the Korn Ferry Tour before they changed the name. So there are some guys in this field that have actually played the course before. As for some of the specifics, it's a par 72, normal slew of par 3s and 5s, but it does have 2 drivable par 4s. It's 7,468 yards, which makes it average length on paper, but per reports on the ground, there is some room to extend that, so keep that in mind. It's a Tom Weisenkamp design. It's typical designer. We don't see a lot of his courses on the PGA Tour, but there are a couple out there if you do want to look into that correlation data. And most importantly of all, I think of all this is the grass type for this week, which is bent grass. It's a type of POA grass. It's grainy. It's got a lot of, hops to it. It doesn't grow the most consistently, at least if it's not manicured perfectly. And usually what this means is that putters that aren't as good excel a little bit. Guys end up making putts that weren't supposed to go in. Some of those really precise putters that need it to travel on their exact intended line to make their putts are going to struggle this week. They're going to see balls bobble left and right, and that's always something that I take into mind when doing my analysis on courses like this. And something also to consider is that there could be some overseeding done this week. This area was hit by the snowstorms as well, just not as severely as some of the more northern regions of Texas. And as a result, we may see some rye overseed, and I'm taking that into consideration as well. Rye is an easier surface to chip on, which makes around the green game just a little bit less important this week. And with that being said, talking about some of those statistics, let's talk about some of the key stats. A couple little notes I wanted to add just before we got into the key stats there is, first of all, there's technically water on 13 of the 18 holes at Craig Ranch, but only 6 of the 18 holes technically actually have it quote-unquote in play. There's a small little creek that runs through the course. It's windy, tiny, pretty similar to the creek that you saw in 18 last week at the Wells Fargo. The thing that differentiates it is that it's typically in the woods. It's typically well out of play. So only if you're missing, huge misses wide, are you going to fall into it. So water only being on 6 of the 18 holes this week, it's just not a big a deal as we're used to seeing on the PGA Tour. And something I also wanted to consider is that the greens being overseeded, if they are with rye, is only going to add even more variance to the picture. When you have bent grass, it has little bobbles in it just naturally, but when you add another grass strain in there, it's going to add even more bobbles. So just wanted to say that's why you're going to see a lot of the putting stats just diminished for me this week. Now for my key stats. Coming in at number 3 is going to be long par 4 and par 5 scoring. So that's going to be classified as holes longer than 485 yards. So there's a lot of unknowns at TPC Craig Ranch, but the one thing that we definitely do know, and we can see it right from the scorecard that they released, is that there's going to be a lot of long par 4s, and the par 5s should be gettable. So Like I said, 9 of the 18 holes this week fall into this category as being either a long par 4 or a par 5. Which is very atypical. That also means that we have some short par 3s, some, like I said, 2 drivable par 4s to kind of even out that distance. So it's going to play interesting this week, I'd say. You're going to have those really long holes that are, your typical hole, but then you're going to have those short holes to take advantage of. That, especially if, you're a super long driver of the golf ball, that you might be able to really, really take advantage of. Hence like a Bryson or something like that. And as a result, we're really going to hunker down on that this week. Scoring on these holes, in particular, like I said, because it is half the holes, is going to separate you this week. There's certain guys that are good with their long irons, some guys that take advantage of that distance better than others, and that's why it comes in at number 3. For our second key stat this week, it is going to be true driving distance. This is an actual average of a player's driving distances over a round, obviously compiled for their total number of rounds. And this gives a more accurate representation of a player's length, I'd say, just because the normal quote-unquote driving distance stat is literally only a measurement of one hole of every round of that player's distance. So I think just taking in, more drives into consideration just always makes the statistic just a little bit more accurate. Something also, the reason why I have true driving distance on here is obviously with that length that we just discussed. Some of those longer holes, having more distance off the tee is obviously going to be beneficial. And something that also makes true driving distance better to focus on this week is because there isn't many hazards. There's, like I said, not much water to hit it into, not as many bunkers as we're used to seeing. And as a result, you're going to be able to bomb the ball this week for pretty much no regard. So that's why it comes in at number 2. It's going to be something that we really leverage a lot this week. And lastly, our number 1 stat for this week is going to be shots gained approach. And if you've seen my analysis before, this shouldn't be a surprise at all. It's routinely the most important statistic from week to week on PGA Tour. And we don't have a lot of data this week for TPC Craig Ranch. And as a result, we're going to hunker down on what typically works. Emphasis is going to be weighted towards the last 3 months form. That's very typical of my analysis as well. In short, from week to week, the most predictable statistic is shots gained approach. Players normally get into really good routines. They get into good rhythms with their iron play. And as a result, it's something that we can look at from, a few weeks past, a couple performances, even a couple months form, and really make accurate predictions about the future. So that this week, it's going to be our number 1 stat. It's the most predictable. It's the, stat that carries the over the most from week to week. And as a result, we're going to use it the most this week to leverage. Something I also wanted to throw in there in regards to shots gained approach was, first of all, we're going to be emphasizing approaches from more than 175 yards, just a little bit more this week. This is due to those long par 4s, obviously the par 5s being so important this week. Hopping right into the player targets for this week. Up at the top with our spend up option this week, we are going to have no other than Jon Rahm coming in at just $11,000. Yeah, just 11 grand, right? Just the second most expensive player in the field. That's all right though. I'm definitely okay with paying that much for him, even after last week's Wells Fargo Championship. Flat out, he looked horrible in round 1. It looked like he didn't get enough sleep the night before or something like that. He lost strokes in all 4 categories. It's pretty much the worst Rahm you've ever seen from Jon Rahm. The good news is he came out on Friday and shot one of the best rounds of the day. The conditions were unbelievably difficult on Friday. He was able to get out there in the morning. He actually had a 5-under round going at one point, which would have blown everyone away that day. Ended up giving a couple strokes back and missing the cut. He was actually really close to pulling off the comeback after the terrible day 1. But when you look at his day 2 performance, he led the field in shots gained tee to green. That's what you want to see. Obviously, he was bouncing back just there in the second round. And I think if he had a couple more rounds to work his way back, he would have done something similar to what Bryson did last week. Going from just making the cut, on the number to actually having a top 10 finish. So I'm not worried about last week's performance. Something also to consider with Rahm is the last time he missed a cut was right before the Memorial Tournament, and then he went out and won. So he's good at bouncing back, so I'm not worried about it. He also profiles really well for the course. He has elite distance off the tee, top 10 there in shots gained off the tee as well. He also has a top 5 approach game. We know that about Jon Rahm. He's pretty much a stud all across the board. and he's also second in the field in long par 4 and par 5 scoring. So he's good on those long holes. He tends to capitalize on the par 5s, and that's what you're going to have to do this week here at Craig Ranch. So something that also gives him a boost here is that he tends to putt well on bent grass. So we saw him win at the Memorial. He has a lot of really good finishes at the Masters, even though he doesn't have a win and whatnot. But I'm looking to see him bounce back this week with, at the very least, a top 5. I think that would give him good momentum going into the PGA Championship. But nothing better than a win going into a major. So maybe he pulls it off this week. Time for my second man in, who I actually believe has a better chance of winning than Jon Rahm this week, which just shows you how much value there is here. And that's going to be Will Zalatoris, coming in at $9,700. He's another golfer who disappointed last week at the Wells Fargo. He ended up missing the cut, and that was mostly due to his putter. He couldn't buy a putt for his life. It's not something we're used to seeing from him, so that raises a little bit of a red flag. But when we look at his baseline and his statistics over his career, it quickly eases a lot of those doubts. He's been absolutely rock solid since we've gotten shots gained numbers on him, and I expect him to revert back to that form. Now, like I said, that was his first missed cut. I don't expect that to happen anymore. But even more importantly for Zalatoris, this is a course that he grew up playing. He's from the Texas area, Dallas area to be exact. And as a result, he played this course a lot growing up. It was a local course, that his family had a lot of connections to, so he was able to get a lot of practice rounds on it. He played it in the Korn Ferry Tour a few times. He didn't play it when it was back on the Nationwide Tour. He was still a little kid then. But he has a lot more experience than anyone else in this field. Like I kind of mentioned there with the Nationwide Tour, there are some guys that have played this a few times in the field. Mark Leishman even played it back in the day and whatnot. But Zalatoris has hundreds of rounds on this golf course. That is going to be a huge asset this week. On top of that, he's by far the best fit for this golf course. If you could imagine a golf course for Will Zalatoris, it would be TPC Craig Ranch. A golf course where you can bomb it without much regard for accuracy. Zalatoris has an extra gear with his driver. If you've ever watched him hit, he has that very smooth driver where he's very accurate. That's what we're used to seeing from him. But when he gears it up, he hits the ball a long way. Now, it might not be very accurate, but this week, that's exactly what he's going to want to do. He's also number 1 in shots gained approach in the field, which is excellent. This is why he's been playing so well of recent. And he also ranks number 3 in the season in terms of long par 4 scoring and par 5 scoring. So he does a lot of his damage on those par 5s, a lot of those long par 4s like we're going to see this week. And as a result, I look for him to top 5 and potentially even win this week, like I said. If I could put an outright on him, I absolutely would. I think it's great value. And that's why he's my second man in. My bread and butter play for this week is somebody we don't see very often, but I think he's going to have a great week out here, and that is Thomas Pieters, coming in at $8,600. Like I said, we're not used to seeing him. He typically reserves his American performances for the majors, some of the larger events like the Genesis, Memorial, and whatnot. But this week we see him as he tries to tune up his game before the PGA Championship. He's had plenty of success when we've seen him in the past. He has 4 top 20 finishes in majors. That should pretty much tell you everything you need to know about his pedigree. He's top 20'd in 4 of his 6 starts. He has that firepower to go out and compete with the very best in the world, let alone a field like this where it's kind of top heavy, and he should be able to dominate a lot of that lower level competition. So he really makes a name for himself, I would say, off the tee. He's somebody that hits the ball a long way, which obviously we are looking for this week. But he is also a very streaky and a very, very good iron player. He's somebody that goes out, gains a ton of strokes from round to round with his irons, but he does tend to bleed strokes with his putter from time to time. He does have some bad rounds with the putter, but when he can avoid those bad rounds, he goes out and wins. We've seen him win 3 times over the last year overseas. He came in 2nd place in the European Tour, and he's quite frankly a top 30 player in the world. You can see that with his official World Golf ranking coming in at 28, and he's underpriced. Just that's flat out at $8,600. He's priced around guys in that 40 to 50 range, sometimes even lower in the official World Golf rankings, and he's a pure value play for me this week. Speaking of value, my value play for this week is Carlos Ortiz, coming in at $7,800. Now, there's a huge drop-off, in my opinion, in talent from the $8,000 to the $7,000 range. And when you look at a lot of the people priced around Carlos Ortiz, he really is in a class of his own. He's a winner this year. We've seen that winning upside from Ortiz. He's no stranger to putting up really low rounds, -6, -7, especially in that first round. He's been a first-round leader, or at least a contender for it a couple times this year. But on top of that, he also profiles really well this week. He's somebody that's above average when it comes to his distance. He's very streaky with his irons, kind of like Thomas Pieters, which I'm okay with a golfer, especially when they're coming in with decent form. But he does struggle with his short game. So again, I think he profiles similarly to Thomas Pieters, maybe with a little bit less of a pedigree. And I think he definitely outshines the people in his price point. He's priced around a lot of guys that have been playing well of recent, but don't have anywhere near the baseline of someone like Ortiz. People like Keith Mitchell coming off of a very solid performance at the Wells Fargo Championship, but not likely something that he's going to reproduce. A lot of guys like that, or even guys priced higher than him like Lee Westwood, that we've seen struggle and really only have a couple good performances over the last year. So Carlos Ortiz, good baseline. Again, he came 65th last week. He made the cut, had a really bad Sunday. But with that volatility, all it takes is for it to come together 1 week. And I like his price point. I like I said, the potential for it to all come together this week. And he's going to be a great value play at $7,800. Something I wanted to add with Carlos Ortiz is when he won this year, it was on the bent grass surface, also in Texas. So he's a lot of good vibes on the surface. He tends to putt better on the surface than his baseline as well. So that's great. And something to mention is that he is very, very prone to large numbers. He's one of the worst on the tour when it comes to double bogey percentage. But this week, the lenient rough as well as the lack of water hazards is going to be his friend. So just wanted to add that. Now, lastly, our diamond in the rough, way down on the board, is going to be Will Gordon, coming in at $6,800. He's the fifth longest player in the field, which is great to see. He routinely gains a lot of strokes off the tee, which gives him a lot of upside. We saw that upside flash at the Travelers, where he finished tied for second. We've obviously seen a few other first-round leaders as well, in recent weeks especially. But he really has struggled when you look at his performances as a whole. He's really, struggled to put together those 4 rounds. He's had those flashes followed by, dramatic ejections from tournaments, for lack of a better word. He's had a couple quadruple bogeys, a couple quintuple bogeys over the last few months, and you just frankly can't have holes like that to even make a cut. So this week, he's somebody who's also going to benefit from the lack of water, I would say. He's also going to benefit from the, I would say, lenient rough. And bent grass has also been a good surface for Will Gordon. At the Travelers, it's also bent grass. He's played well in recent weeks on Bermuda grass as well. Different surface, but you like to see a hot putter. So I'm definitely going to take a few shots on him this week. He's not going to be, a core value play for me or anything. He is very, very volatile. He's somebody that could very easily miss the cut. But I really do like that potential. Like I said before, we've seen him finish in the top 5 before, and you can't say that of pretty much anyone else in the 6K range. That's all I have for this week, guys. Let me know in the comments who your favorite play is this week. Also, let me know who you guys think is going to win, because a lot of times that's different, but let me know both. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the content. It helps me out. And also make sure that you guys can see it when I post it in the future. And with that being said, good luck this week, and I'll see you next week.